If you're in favor of freedom of speech, that means you're in favor of freedom of speech precisely for views you despise. Otherwise, you're not in favor of freedom of speech.
Good evening, dear listeners. You're listening to WHRW 90.5 FM Binghamton. This is Binghamton Review Live. We're back again. We got a one-topic show today. One full 30 minutes of one thing, so we'll see how it goes. Back again with Matt and Jordan talking about climate change today.
Welcome back.
What's up, beautiful people?
Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Happy holidays, because it's technically the holidays. All right, Jordan brings this topic to us today. Comes out of the White House, I believe.
That is correct, Patrick, my dear friend. So, what we have here is an article in The Hill, and it's pretty short, so I'm going to read most of it. It is, the headline reads, Trump on dire warnings in climate report, quote, I don't believe it. So, it says here that President Trump said Monday that he doesn't believe the findings of a major report his administration released forecasting dire consequences to the United States from climate change. Yeah, I don't believe it, Trump told reporters as he left the White House for a campaign rally for Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, a Republican from Mississippi, when asked about the predictions of economic devastation. I've seen some of it, I've read it, and it's true, and it's fine, you know, but Trump said of the report. Here we go. Okay, the report is part of part of the fourth congressionally mandated national climate assessment from the multi-agency Global Change Research Program. Came out Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and a major shopping day for the United States. That led critics to charge that Trump was trying to bury the findings. The hundreds of government and external scientists involved in the research concluded that climate change could cost the United States billions of dollars annually within decades if greenhouse gases are not dramatically reduced. Without substantial and sustained global mitigation and regional adaptation efforts, climate change is expected to cause growing losses to American infrastructure and property and impede the rate of economic growth over this country, the report found. The conclusions generally align with the scientific consensus on climate change, including that human activity via greenhouse gas emissions is the chief cause of global warming and its impacts. And then it goes on to say how Trump has been on sort of the climate change denial train for years. Like in 2012, it was the first time that he tweeted about the whole thing about global warming being a Chinese hoax to basically cost America manufacturing jobs. Basically, so it's basically for China to take our manufacturing jobs, and it also discusses how he is rolling back a lot of regulations, especially Obama-era regulations from the EPA, and has a quote from Rick Santorum, who, very trustworthy source for climate change information. If you want great, peer-reviewed, nuanced, information on climate change, Rick Santorum's your guy.
That sounds sarcastic.
He said that basically the classic thing that right-wingers say, which is that the research that these people did on climate change was motivated by money, and surprise, surprise, it says in the article, quote, he did not provide any evidence to back up that claim. He also said, if there was no climate change, we'd have a lot of scientists looking for work. The reality is that a lot of these scientists are driven by the money that they receive. And then it just goes on to talk about some irrelevant senator that I've never heard of, a Republican from Texas named Tom DeLay. So he added his own contribution to this, and that's the end of the article. So first off, I want to address the president's comments on this, because he said, "I don't believe it." But President Trump, I don't care what you believe. I care about what the facts are. And the facts are that if you look at the overwhelming majority of the scientific information on this, including, I have NASA as a source here, including NASA, you will see that we are, in fact, in a very dangerous situation, because the carbon dioxide levels have never been higher in the entire history of the Earth, especially since humans have been industrializing. It's risen dramatically over the past 200-300 years since we've been industrialized. The more we've industrialized, it has gotten worse. Now, the pivots that I would like to address that conservatives often, and I'm saying conservatives because you'll find very few Democrats, other than those bought off by fossil fuel companies, which I'll get into in a minute. You'll find very few Democrats and very few left-leaning people that deny climate change. The climate change deniers are almost exclusively on the right. That's just true. And by the way, a lot of the politicians, Republican politicians, take a lot of money from oil and gas. The number one recipient of oil and gas money, Ted Cruz. There's also Paul Ryan, Heidi Heitkamp, John Cornyn, Steve Scalise, Jim Inhofe, Marsha Blackburn. All these guys, that have a lot of influence in the Republican Party, and even, like I said, there's a couple Democrats here that they list as well. This is from OpenSecrets.org, which tracks the donations that politicians get. But anyway, that's a larger point about money in politics. But the point is that what happens with conservatives is they flip the conspiracy. So they flip the conspiracy right on its head. They say, oh, these greedy scientists that get like $40,000 and $50,000 grants from the government are purposely trying to, push this agenda of climate change in order to get more funding. And it's like, okay, maybe you can cherry pick 2 or 3 examples of that, but what's more common is you have situations like this where it's the Republicans that are being paid off, and even some Democrats, like I said, like Beto O'Rourke, who was running against Ted Cruz. He took hundreds of thousands of dollars from the oil and gas industry. It's the politicians that are paid to say that climate change is not real. That's the real conspiracy, is the oil and gas lobby paying these politicians to spew that garbage. And it's the same thing with they're not really a news site, but they are a conservative site like PragerU, who, yes, some of their funding does come from fans, and a good amount of it, to be fair, but they are also hugely funded by the Wilkes brothers, who they're in the business of fracking. So they have a vested interest in spreading propaganda about climate change. And don't even get me. Actually, you know what? I will get started on this, and then I'll let you in, Matt.
Jump in here. Yeah.
But this is like my biggest political issue, so I'm really passionate about this particular issue. Like, don't even get me started on the whole Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro thing, where they're just like, well, the people pushing climate change are economic Marxists. It's like, oh my God. It's one of those things where, and then of course Jordan Peterson with his favorite, the postmodern neo-Marxist, blah, 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 blah. Just, anything I don't like, just, throw mud, hope it sticks. So this is a really, really tough issue, and it's a complicated issue, but I prefer to take the vast majority of scientists over paid-off shill scientists and politicians that have a vested interest in denying its existence.
Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying I don't believe it either. So first of all, politicians don't get bought off. I mean, they do, but that's not the common thing. These Republicans who are taking money from oil and gas, natural gas, they're not bought off. They have opinions in the first place that are pro-oil, and therefore these people pay money to them because they want them elected. It's not the other way around. It's not like we'll pay you money if you become pro-oil. Like, they have their beliefs first, and then that trickles down to getting money because of their beliefs. Same thing with like politicians that are pro-gun getting money from like the NRA. It's not like the NRA's buying politicians to be pro-gun. They're pro-gun first, and that's why they get money for it. So it's not exactly buying off. It's just donations. Second of all, I don't buy it because the science is very iffy, and the report, which is from the CDC, is clearly politically biased. So what they do, and this is true for like most of these kind of reports that come out, they come out with a low estimate of what could happen, a middle estimate, and a high estimate. And what they always do is they always use the high estimate every single time. If you look at it, there's never been a time where they have underestimated water level rising, or when they underestimated the amount that temperature would rise. It's always that they overestimate it. And the reason why is because they always use the high estimate or above the high estimate. In this case, they use above the high estimate in order to come to their political conclusions. That comes from Roger Pilek. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But he came out, he did the math, and what they did was they took the high estimate and they doubled it in order to come to that conclusion that we're going to lose 10% of GDP by 2100. Which, first of all, that's not like our economy is going to decline. It's that whatever the number was going to be in 2100, it'll be 10% lower than that. Which is still higher than today. It's not like we're going to stop growing because of it. So what that is, for the people who don't know, is the CDC report predicted that if we don't do anything about climate change, that the climate change is going to cost us 10% GDP by 2100, which is just clearly false. They're using double the high estimate, and again, they're misinterpreting what that means economically. Second, they put a whole lot of false facts in there, like that there are more hurricanes, more natural disasters, stronger ones, which is not true. It's been extremely constant for the past 150 years. So they're, again, just throwing in false facts, I guess, non-facts, lies, in order to come up with a political conclusion at the end. There's literally two parts of this CDC report. There's the science part, and then there's the political part at the end. And they always use the high estimates or above the high estimates to come to their conclusions. So when Trump says he doesn't believe it, I really don't either. I mean, if you look at the actual report, it's not very consistent to what's actually happening. This goes on for every report that's ever come out on this stuff. I mean, water levels were already supposed to rise, like 5 feet, 3 feet. They haven't. So again, I'm not denying climate change. The climate is clearly changing, as it always has. I'm not denying the fact that it's man-made, or partially man-made. Man is clearly having a part in it. What I'm denying is that this is not an apocalyptic thing that we need these extreme solutions to that will end up really hurting the economy now. I mean, what would you rather? 10% loss in GDP, which isn't going to happen, but 10% loss in GDP 82 years from now? Or 50, 60, 70% loss in GDP now? I mean, it doesn't make sense. There are literally liberals on Twitter calling for the end of capitalism because of this report and because of the UN report that came out a couple months ago. It's really bad. I don't trust these since that hockey stick graph scenario where they used clearly false data in order to show...
Conservatives do the same thing.
They don't.
Yes, they do.
They don't. The hockey stick graph...
In what respect?
They do the same thing. They'll take samples of when carbon dioxide levels are consistent and then push that as, see, carbon dioxide levels haven't risen. See, we can prove it. See.
Most conservatives don't deny that carbon dioxide levels rise. What most of them will say is that the United States isn't the cause of that, because the United States for the past decade has been the #1 reducer in their carbon emissions. That's China and India who are increasing it, and they're allowed to increase it under the Paris Accords, which isn't legally enforcing anyway, but they're legally allowed to do that until 2030. They're the ones who have the vast amount of responsibility for whatever happens to the climate, and they're just increasing it. The United States is still decreasing it, and a lot of that's because of are switching to fossil fuels.
Yeah, I'm not
Natural
blaming the
gas.
United States for this. I'm not blaming just the United States. I think China's really bad. You're right. India's really bad. I agree with that. But there's still things that we can do as the most powerful nation on the planet to, and I agree with that Trump should have pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, but not from a right-wing position, from the left-wing position. I supported him getting out of it because it was too, not for the reasons he gave, but I thought it was way too soft and not legally binding, like Matt was saying. So I do agree with some of the point that you just made. I
Yeah.
just want to make that clear.
There are no legally binding international contracts.
That is true.
There's
Not even the
no,
United Nations.
yeah, there's no law enforcement internationally. Like, you cannot have a treaty that is legally enforced, just enforced through faith. Like, you have faith that whoever you're making the deal with is going to uphold it, or faith that your allies will come to your aid, but nothing on the international stage is legally binding, so there's really nothing we can do. Like, we can't go to China and be like, well, stop your car, and that would be bad, too. That'd be a horrible thing to do. I mean, can you imagine if during our Industrial Revolution, Britain's like, sorry guys, you're just going to have to cut all of your, stop everything you're doing? That'd be ridiculous. Like, this is part of a growing economy. A growing economy goes from agrarian to industrial to service economy. And China's in an industrial phase. It would be extremely harmful to their economy, too. Not that I really care about China that much. Yes, exactly. Not that, like, they're my priority or anything, but it would be economically immoral to ask them to just cut their carbon emissions with something that isn't dire, that isn't apocalyptic like the Democrats are making out to be. They're alarmists. They really are. Climate change, of course, a thing. Does man play a part? Of course. Are we all gonna die? No. I mean, the likelihood that we die is the same likelihood that we'll die from repealing net neutrality. That didn't happen. The Democrats are just alarmist about everything that Trump says, everything that the Republicans believe for the past couple decades. Not even just Trump, with Bush, too. With Reagan, too. I mean, Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court, we're all gonna die? Yeah. That didn't happen. Us not having a carbon tax, us not destroying capitalism in the name of a report that has no facts, that's stupid.
No facts according to what source? What's your source for that?
The report itself, it says water levels could rise. It doesn't say anything about will.
That's cherry picking one sentence out of the report.
No,
That's not
it's the whole thing. The whole thing is a prediction, and no prediction in the history of these reports have been right. All of them have been overstated every time, and this one even says it, like, flat out, that they're using the highest, the high end, the high approximation, and then they go over that. They're like, yeah, the highest amount that this could go, let's double it, and then we'll use that to say how bad our economy is going to get hurt. That's ridiculous. That's immoral.
But it will hurt our economy because there's a lot of natural disasters that are going to happen as a result of this. If one, I should say, because it's not just, I'm just making a general statement here. If one listens to what people actually say and what smart people on this issue actually say, rather than Democrats who are disingenuous about caring about this stuff anyway, because the Democrats are disingenuous about pretty much everything, which is why I hate them. But anyway, the point is that the problem with climate change is not we're going to die tomorrow. That's not what the problem is. It's that there are natural disasters that are going to happen as a result of climate change. There's going to be more wildfires, bigger wildfires, more tropical storms, bigger tropical storms, bigger hurricanes. There's going to be more extreme weather patterns. So it's not. So that's why, for instance, climate scientists started using the term climate change as opposed to global warming, because global warming is a little bit misleading. Because yes, some places are going to get warmer, like the Middle East, which is going to be uninhabitable in the next few decades. You think we have a refugee crisis now? Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. But there's also places where it's going to get cooler, which is why I'm saying that both extremes are going to get more extreme as this issue progresses. And here's the part that I think we're all going to agree on, and then I'll let you speak, Matt. Don't worry.
I have a quick question after that, after Matt's done.
Okay.
Sure.
Here's the part that I think we're all going to agree with. The problem with this issue is that I think, and for me, this issue is not, oh, I'm on the left, so I have to take this position. No. This is a moral issue. This should not be a political issue. This should be a basic human decency issue that we need to keep track of what people are doing to our environment, and we need to take care of it, because not only for ourselves but for future generations, and just because it's the moral thing to do to care about the only home, to care about the state of the only home that we've ever known. This is about morality. This is not about politics for me, or not just about politics, because I think that to really solve this, we're going to have to get beyond politics and do. We're not going to have to rely on the politicians. We got to rely on ourselves, and which is why. And then, real quick, I promise, real quick. One of the reasons why, because Matt, you brought up opposition to capitalism. The thing about that is that the people that make that argument, including myself, from our point of view, I'm not saying it's correct, but just from our point of view, anti-capitalists believe that capitalism does not offer an incentive to be environmentally friendly, because even if you had something like consumer boycott for products that pollute the environment, still, if you're a company that's strapped for cash, you're going to do whatever you can to make a profit. That's what the capitalist system is designed to do, make a profit. It's not designed to, it's for short-term gains. It's not for long-term consequences. That's what the capitalist system is about. It's not concerned with, we're going to, this action X is going to pollute river X. It's about, how can we make $500,000 right now?
Correct. Then that's why it's good. So anyway, first of all, to the people who are saying we're going to have increased natural disasters, I want to ask them, how do they know that? Because it's been extremely constant over the past 150 years, even with the temperature rising. I mean, I have not seen a better example of a chocolate chip cookie graph in the history of ever, which basically just means there's no correlation between the two. Temperature's been rising. There's been no change in severity or amount of natural disasters. Second of all, the Middle East being uninhabitable, I want to ask, how do you know? Are you using the really high approximation or the twice the really high approximation? I mean, it's just simply not true. And one way you know that they're exaggerating this really hard is that they had an approximate death count. If we don't do anything about climate change, they guessed how many deaths there would be. And part of that count was that suicides are going to increase 50% because it's hotter. That's in the report. I think that accounted for 26,000 extra deaths. How do you know? We can't even statistically link bullying to suicide. You think we're going to link it getting hotter 100 years from now to suicide? That's ridiculous. This report is honestly completely immoral. So, conservatives, they're not against saving the environment. They're also not for destroying people's livelihoods or destroying businesses over it. The best thing that could possibly happen in the mind of a true conservative is we let businesses do their thing. That leads to innovation. So what would happen is we get to, let's say solar panels is our ultimate goal. Let's say solar panels is the best solution to fixing climate change or whatever it is. Every house, every car, everything powered through the sun. Cool. The best way to do that is through capitalism. If we started the world over and made capitalism never, ever, ever exist, there is no plausible path to ever getting the solar panels. And if there are, it would take thousands of extra years. There's no incentive to innovate without capitalism. You made up the point that companies work for profit. That's why they would end up building solar panels, is because that's going to have a profit in the future. Especially, let's say we're going to all agree that oil runs out in 125 years, which is false, but, just a number. Then companies will be like, oh, wow, solar panels, a lot of people are going to buy those. Let's make those, and then make a profit, and then we get cheap solar panels quickly. That's how we got the iPhone so cheap so quickly. The iPhone came out in 2007. Cars became super cheap. Everybody has them super quickly. That stuff could never have happened before capitalism came into existence. Capitalism creates the incentives for people to innovate to the point where we can get to things like solar panels or wind power, which I'm not a huge fan of. or water power or whatever.
That I
power.
agree with. Yeah, wind power. Nah,
It's
that
not
that
very-
I agree with.
It's not very efficient and it kills birds. Like,
Exactly, I agree with that.
Patrick, there's 3 minutes left. You had a question.
Yeah, real quick
Yeah.
question. So what do we say to the people that argue that climate change is going to impact third world countries the most? I know, Matt, you were earlier talking about how you move from an agrarian to an industrial to like a modern economy type of thing. Do these countries that would have the most impact under climate change, will they ever get to that stage? I looked up some of the reasons why they might be impacted, but I'm wondering, maybe what are your guys' thoughts on?
Yeah, I'll just take 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so developed countries are going to develop a lot quicker with really powerful capitalist countries there to trade with them and to help them. Like the United States is the best possible thing for a developing country. So if we start chaining ourselves down, then these developing countries are going to have... There's something called the advantage of backwardness, which is the advantage of industrializing last, because you get to cheat off of everybody else. You get all their technology without having to do anything.
It's true. Civilization 5 taught me that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So,
Advantage of lateness. That's what. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what that's called.
So, developing countries will benefit hugely if the United States develops solar panels first. So, climate change, yeah, sure, it might affect them, but it also could help them. I mean, I've seen scientists argue that the last heat wave we had was actually considered a time of prosperity because the temperature was hotter, so that they could grow more different types of crops. So it could help them if they're agrarian. It could help them if they're industrializing. It could help them if they need aid from the United States. It could help them get to solar panels faster, just like the United States. We get them, and then 20 years later they have them just because we invented them first. So climate change could affect them. We don't know how, but we do know that regulating the U.S. economy will hurt them.
Right. Jordan, last thoughts?
Yeah. It's interesting because you were asking about third world countries, right? Yeah,
Right.
because first of all, with that, I think that again, I'm not just concerned about third world countries. I am, believe me, but I think that this should be again a universal thing. This should be for the benefit of everybody, third world countries included. So, however they want to do it is up to them. However they want to help solve the problem is up to them. But I think that that everybody should group together and unite on this issue, which I see as a very serious issue.
For sure. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I think next week is our last show.
It is of the semester, not
Of the semester.
Of the show of the semester. Yeah. So if you like what we're putting down, be sure to tune in next week. Have a lovely evening and the rest
Ciao.
of the week, everyone.
Could, I guess.